Hi, I'm Brent Cunningham, the Operations Director for Small Press Distribution, the nation's only nonprofit distributor of small press material. This is video number 2 in our how-to series for aspiring publishers. Video number 1, as you hopefully watched, was on printing, which we felt was the right place to start. You've got to have some actual objects before you start thinking about being a publisher. Now we're moving on to distribution. And for us, distribution in a way is just a word. It means getting the books out there. But we think it's the sort of logical next place to go and think about as a small press publisher, because there's a couple of very important decisions that you should probably make early on. The main decision about becoming, when you think about distribution as a small press, is to decide whether you're going to be doing distribution yourself or whether you're going to use an actual official professional distribution company like SPD. Let's look at those two options for a second. If you are going to do your own distribution as a press, the advantage is you're going to keep a higher percentage of every book that you sell. You might already in fact be selling books, maybe off your own website, and minus a small PayPal fee or something like that. If you price a book at $10, you might be keeping close to $10, and you might have gotten used to that. When you start to think about distribution, one way to take a halfway step towards working with a distributor is to set up direct relationships with wholesalers like Ingram or Baker & Taylor. A wholesaler is basically an entity in the book selling world that tries to centralize all possible books and be a one-stop shop for buying books. So you could talk to them and try to set up a relationship, or you could try to get with an official distributor like SPD or one of the many other distributors. But the thing to realize is you are, regardless of whether you go with a wholesaler or direct, you are putting another entity in the supply chain. So you're no longer really selling direct to that reader. Sometimes your book might go from a distributor to a wholesaler. You send it to the distributor sells it to the wholesaler. Wholesaler might sell it to a bookstore, and only then might it reach the customer. And all those entities are going to take a cut, which we call margins, in that process. So at the end of the day, your $10 book, you might be getting something like $3 or $4 back. That's a very different structure and setup that you want to think about early on when you start going into that process. So given that you're just getting less money back, why use a distributor at all? Obviously, they help you sell more books. How do they do this? First of all, and maybe primarily, they do help you reach a lot of places that you simply can't as a small entity. Distributors, wholesalers, they sell into bookstores, into libraries, they can get into college stores, so your book really can't be taught unless you have a distributor or at least a wholesaler to get it there. There are structural reasons having to do with returns and credits why these entities don't work with small press publishers. But basically, the long and short of it is you do have to have a distributor to reach these folks. Number 2, a distributor can help greatly with marketing. That's something actually the wholesalers will not help you do. We're going to have a whole video on marketing. It's video number 4, so we'll talk more about that, but certainly that can be a big boost. And they basically, as a whole, they actively represent your titles to the trade, and that means a lot of things, but really the distributor becomes your representative out in the book selling world. Okay, so let's talk about distribution in the broad sense. I'll map it out kind of quickly and it's an exciting world. The big 6, this is the kind of rule name in the book selling world for the major publishers based in New York. This is the HarperCollins, the Random Houses, the Penguins, and so forth. Those folks actually do their own distribution. They're so large that they don't have distributors. This distribution is in-house. One level below that, there are these mid-sized independent publishers, and they do have distributors. The best known ones for taking on literary material are folks like Consortium, PGW. There's a whole host of, there's UPNE, DAP, SBC. I'm missing a few of them, but they all have acronyms of some kind. And what these entities do, you know, their requirement for really talking to you as a small publisher, I mean, as a rule of thumb, there are ways around it, but you probably need to be at a point where all of your books are selling in the neighborhood of 1,000 units before you can have a meaningful discussion with these distributors. They're going to want you to be professionalized to a pretty high degree. So below that level of distributors, that's where SPD comes in for literary titles. So you have to apply, just like you'd apply to those other distributors, you apply to SPD. We would certainly encourage you to do so, and this will be the portion where we present a little advertisement for SPD, but remember we are a non-profit, so our advice is, we like to think anyway, not driven by profit, and hopefully can be a little more trusted than some. But so if you want to apply to SPD, we encourage you to do so. The first step is to go to www.spdbooks.org. There's a tab in the upper right-hand corner called Publishers. Click on that. And from there you'll get a link to our publisher handbook. There's a process by which you would apply. It's important to note, since we do get a lot of applications from presses doing just magazines and journals, we love magazines and journals very much. We do not, as a rule, take on presses whose sole publication is a magazine or a journal. So a little caveat there. There is going to be a forthcoming video with Laura Moriarty, our acquisitions director, who will go through some more of the ins and outs of applying. But the important thing to realize, and just to put in again a plug for SPD, we are funded by the NEA and other public foundations, and that is a great advantage to you as a small press. We have a website that allows us to sell directly to individuals and builds a kind of cohesive community for SPD's readers. That's something that the other distributors I mentioned, the PGWs and the consortiums, don't have. They don't sell direct to individuals. You know, we've been around 45 years. That's an advantage in book selling. And like I implied before, we really are kind of the last entity standing that will have a discussion with a press selling well under 1,000 units. So we might be your best bet. So that's really an overview of distribution. Hopefully it was helpful. Up next we're going to talk about pricing, because again, the financial structure when you're working with the distributor is very different from the one you're used to. And then we're going to talk about marketing, and that's really going to be, in the end, the key. When you sell more books, you can do larger runs. When you do larger runs of books, each book gets cheaper. As soon as each book gets cheaper, you're really doing a more effective job of being a distributor, of being a publisher. So again, hope to hear any questions from you. I'm at brent@spdbooks.org. Be happy to try to answer them. And thanks so much for listening to video number 2 on distribution.